Well, a very good afternoon and a welcome along to this afternoon's Light Bite lunch. I'm delighted to say we have two old friends of the show joining us. And I say old in terms of I've known them a long time. I'm not passing any comments on their age before I get given out to for that. So joining us, I'm delighted to say we have both Brendan Murphy.
Hello.
Oh, that's gone very noisy there now, Brendan. We'll see what we can do on that in a few
Okay.
minutes. And we have Gary Grimes from Simplí Business Finance.
Hey Rory, hey Brandon, how are you guys?
I'm good. Is that better?
That's a little bit better now, Brendan. So we'll start with yourself, Brendan. We'll get you to tell us a little bit about yourself first of all, and then we'll get into discussing everything on the show properly.
So I'm an international business consultant, and I've worked overseas in Ireland and across Europe, in Kazakhstan, Oman, Turkey, and Ukraine, with large corporations as well as medium-sized businesses. And now I'm back from Ukraine. I left the day they started bombing. They bombed my house, so that was the beginning of a journey of 4,200 kilometers to Ireland with my family, and some of that was on the media, as you probably saw. And now I'm back home in Ireland. I'm pleased to be so.
That's great, and we're delighted you made it back safely. And also, Gary, we'll hear a little bit from yourself.
Yeah, hey, well, Gary Grimes. I'm the Managing Director of Simplí Business Finance. And Simplí Business Finance was started in 2020. And what we do, we're an SME finance consultancy firm. So we partner with Irish SMEs and we work with them when they're looking to access finance for their business. And unlike Brendan, we only work in Ireland, so we don't work. I could name a few counties instead of a few countries, but yeah, we're going to based in Ireland, based in Dublin, Crumlin Village, working with businesses all over in Ireland, and we source all of our funding and financing for our clients from the non-bank finance space here in Ireland, which is growing rapidly, and I'd be delighted to talk more about that today.
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks a lot. So before we get into the nitty gritty of everything we're going to talk about today, I wanted to ask you, Gary, with two main players leaving the market, two of the main pillar banks leaving in KBC and Ulster Bank.
Yeah.
What are people's real options? I mean, I'm hearing people talking about trying to get an appointment with a bank to move their account to them and being quoted not just weeks, but months before they can have an appointment to do it.
I'd say that Rory is part of the problem, but I think the problem's a lot bigger than that. Like I think, the central bank there just recently have kind of been called out by the Consumer Protection Agency as they used the words, was in an article yesterday, get your finger out, because they've been criticised because of their approach to the situation. It's been very, I wouldn't say lackluster, but not to undermine what's happening, but just so people really do understand, with KBC and with Ulster Bank shutting up shop in Ireland and moving, what that has created is it represents the biggest bank switching exercise in the history of the state. And that's a massive, massive task. Now, considering that the current pillar banks, which are, your Bank of Ireland, Permanent TSB and your AIB, they only have so many people working for them. So you're talking about inside of KBC and Ulster Bank, I'm seeing the effects of it from clients in the businesses, but on the personal side of it, you're looking at about 1 million accounts, give or take. And that's the type, and inside those 1 million accounts, you need to take into consideration what lending facilities that client has, what direct debits that client has, what standing orders, what recurring payments they have, like, paying your gym and all that bits and pieces. All of that now needs to be changed over to another bank. And that's where I think the big problems are. So what we're seeing in Ireland at the moment, we all know the current options: AIB, Bank of Ireland, Permanent TSB. Beyond that, Revolut have become, very well known because it had massive, massive rise in popularity just because of the ease and access of being able to use the account, which I don't personally use it. My personal preferred option is an Irish digital bank called Fire. I do my own business banking with them and I do my personal banking with them. They're Irish found and they're based in St. John Registers Quay. So, but look, just talking about the options with the clients, I think the biggest challenge we're going to see I think the timing is terrible, on the other side of COVID, because we're at the same there 2 years where it's been incredibly disruptive to individuals, both losing their jobs. Those individuals may now have to move to a new bank where they might have to do a credit application just to get a new credit card, or they might have to do a credit application just to get an overdraft facility or even a bank account. And if they're looking at what's happened in the last 6 months, you might see an unpaid here or direct debits being unpaid. And that all, I might even have loans or credit card repayments that have been missed in the last 2 years. It's all going to show up on the CCR. So it's not all doom and gloom. We're going to get through it. We're going to deal with it. I absolutely believe that. But options, being in Ireland, we are still very limited. We probably have the 3 core, as I mentioned, AIB, Bank of Ireland, Permanent TSB. And then on top of that, you've got your digital banks, your Revoluts, N26, which are a German bank that are getting a little bit bigger. Then obviously mentioning Fire Financial Services, who personally I would recommend to anyone who's looking to open a new account.
Right. And what about things like the credit union or post bank? Can they actually be considered major players yet, or are they still very much in their infancy?
Very much in their infancy, absolutely. On Post in particular, I recently had a problem, and myself and my girlfriend have a joint account we're on Post, and that problem was ironically created by the banks through having our savings and our money in the credit union. And obviously the credit unions being given a kind of a nudge by the banks because they were holding so much funding that they had to reduce the amount that the average person could hold in one of their accounts. So I moved a lot of my stuff over to On Post, and I found the journey very seamless, to be honest. Yeah, we opened a joint account. We filled out a form which is like about 20 steps away from where I am now. Filled out a form, sent it off with our ideas. Took about a week to open, which was good. Got our separate debit cards out in the post. Just had to call them to activate them, and that was it. But yeah, they are very much in their infancy, and I do think like someone like On Post, if they got 20,000 applications tomorrow, they would probably struggle to deal with them.
Yeah. So it's something to watch for.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this, Brendan, on the whole changing of bank accounts? And
well, I mean, I think obviously the traditional legacy banks are on a slow road to decline, and the services they offer are being broken out to specialists. And you have the digital banks that are in the ascendancy. Part of the problem is, as Gary says, is your credit rating and your history. And when banks pull the plug, they really leave you struggling to breathe and struggling to get everything organized. And it just seems to me that the reputation of the banks are just getting worse and worse and worse. And how we understand banks needs to simply stop being the way it was. It's not what they do. They're not going to do it going forward. And you need to maybe have different banks for different parts of your life. In terms of the money transit system, paying your bills, maybe you're using a card or you're using a digital bank. If you're looking for savings, you may be going into structured notes or some other investment tool that's available from a non-bank provider. And it's this whole disintegration of the bank has been going on for a long time now, 20 odd years it's been happening. But we as individuals haven't lost our understanding of what the bank is supposed to do, and it doesn't do what we think it does. I mean, it's part of it is us rethinking how we understand money and where we put our money. And part of it is the banks just pulling the plug and saying, well, look, sorry, we're out, and you go and fend for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Gary, I have a question actually coming in there from Monique for you.
Cool.
Can Fire do everything any other digital bank can do, or is it more limited in?
No, they can do pretty much anything any of the other banks can do. And what the advantage even of that is, when you open a Fire account, you automatically get a Euro account and a GBP account. So a pound account as well. So you automatically get those 2 accounts straight away. They have, as of the Irish Euro accounts, were limited for direct debit capability, but that's become active now. So pretty much the only limitation they would have is that being a digital bank, you can't go and lodge cash with them. That's about it. But no, I personally like Fire. Like I'll give you an example of the difference between Fire making a payment and AIB, for an example. My brother-in-law shares the office here with me in Dublin 12, and he's an AIB customer. And a couple of weeks ago, we ran a little test where it was how quickly could you log into your banking and make a payment to a payee. And with AIB, it took him just under 4.5 minutes. With Fire and me at the computer, took just over 36 seconds. And that's just an example of why I just could never imagine going back to using a pillar bank. That's
Yeah.
how far gone I am anyway.
And Monique has actually followed that up. And can employers pay wages into Fire? I assume that if you have a traditional IBAN and BIC, etc. So that
Irish. Yeah, they're regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland, so it's IE BOIBANs. And another great feature of it is even talking about bank accounts. You could create for businesses in particular. You can create separate IBANs inside your ownership in there. With the click of a button. There's no new application to be made. You pay a small fee for creating another account. So for me personally, I have two accounts, which is my day-to-day and my tax liability account. And when creating a tax account, it was a click of a button, you rename it, and it was that. So we can take payments and send them. But also, God, now that I'm thinking about it, like one of the reasons I really enjoy using them is their ability to settle transactions as well. So realistically, anything that any pillar bank has sent me before 1:30 today, I would get that before 4:30 today. So it doesn't matter where that's coming from. We see these challenges with pillar banks where, if I'm an AIB customer, I'm going to send Brendan a few euro, he's Bank of Ireland. We're kind of preconditioned to believe that it's going to take a couple of days to get there. And we were so surprised if it gets there the same day. But again, Fire solves that problem. Anything before 1:30 in the day, it's in the bank account that day as well.
Right, so absolutely, I think it's time to start looking at some of these other options that are there.
Yeah.
Right, and so if we move on then and stay with yourself, Gary, and actually just there's another comment from Monique there about yourself, Gary, that she knows from experience how hard you work for your clients. So clearly you're
I have a lot of time for Monique. Yeah, she's a great businesswoman.
Yes, your work is appreciated. So let's talk about accessing finance for a business.
Yeah.
Right. The whole peer-to-peer side of lending and the various non-pillar bank finance options that have opened up.
Yeah.
Right. Is it really as easy as you make it sound on your LinkedIn videos and that type of thing?
Yeah, it can be. Look, business finance, Rory, has been radically overcomplicated by how the banks process applications. Now, that's not to say every single application that's made to a bank is torturous or it's long and drawn out, but the vast majority of them are. And that's unfortunately Irish businesses and individuals. There has been a lot of the cases where it's nearly intimidating to go and make an application in a bank, and it shouldn't be, because banks only exist because of their clients and their customers. That's the reality. They're like a business like anyone else. They have to have clients and customers to make money. So, but the accessing of those financing solutions, ISME do a report, and not even my words, but ISME do a report, the Irish Small and Medium Enterprise Association. They do a bank watch report, and if you look at the statistics that come out of that, businesses waiting 4 to 6 weeks to get a decision and then another number of weeks to draw down funds. What the peer-to-peer lenders and what the other alternative finance lenders in Ireland are providing, they're not out there looking for bad debt businesses or businesses who are subprime, or there is very bankable businesses that are using their services. It's just these particular platforms, when in Ireland, the word non-banking, there's just a lack of education around what the options actually are. Some people might actually still believe it's a guy at the end of the street dealing money under the table in a shady room. That's what some people might think an alternative lender is, but it's the total opposite, because they're actually highly, highly sophisticated institutions that are in many cases technology driven and have the ability to do things with the technology that they use just a lot faster than making an application. A case in point in that would be, like, you take a lender like Linked Finance now, who's like, they're on the cusp of adopting open banking. open banking will revolutionize how businesses get assessed for credit in this country because it will speed up the process even more. We still have a long way in Ireland to go to even adopt an open banking as just as Irish people. But they also, a lot of the times when we're dealing with these lenders in the alternative space as well, they ask for less documentation, but the documentation they ask for is core financial information that can be used to make a credit decision on a business. And well, I make it sound easy because for me, we try and the name of my business is Simplí, which is the Irish word for simple. We always say, keep it super simple. And it can be, yeah. Naturally, when you go up to your, more than 250K, 500K applications, there is an element of extra work that has to get done. But that work is not, you're not being asked what your kids had for dinner 3 weeks ago or that kind of thing, But definitely, and it's going to get better, Rory. We were chatting there. There's this in Ireland right now. There's still this adoption of non-bank finance space. 80% of Irish business owners will still see the banks as the first phone call that they make. I firmly believe, as Brendan said, the decline of the bank. I firmly believe within 5 to 7 years, that first phone call will be to a non-bank finance institution, and it'll follow what happened in the UK.
Yeah. Your thoughts on this, Brendan? Like, have you encountered, as you travel around the world, many peer-to-peer type lending arrangements?
Well, not only that, I've designed and had built by IT specialists peer-to-peer platforms, because I'm a very great believer in the disaggregation of banking. And when you're working in a country like Ukraine, the banking system's not designed to work the way that Irish people are used to. So you wouldn't go for a lot of the services because they don't provide it. And matching investors with businesses, so that peer-to-peer, so that it's not going through a bank. The mortgage system doesn't go through a bank. Insurance doesn't go through a bank. Payment systems don't go through a bank. Monobank, which is the equivalent of Revolut, has had massive success simply because, as Gary was talking about, the bureaucracy, it takes too long, too many documentations, not all of it's relevant, and there's too many hands that both handle it in the bank. So it's too many people involved, and it needs to be processed. It needs to be made into a simple algorithm, and you get the money or you don't get the money, or you get the transaction or you don't. And to be fair, the global owners of the money transit system, like the Visa, the MasterCard, they're masters. They know exactly how this works. They profile people. And I honestly look forward to the day when people don't talk about the bank in the way that we talk about it now, because it's not what they do. Our frustration is we ask the bank to do something that it won't do anymore. It used to do it. You used to go see the manager. You used to know the manager. The manager used to live in the big house around the corner from wherever you were. But that's not the case now. Everything is distant. It's less human interaction. It's more to do with digital fast transfer, quick payment systems. And I do think that part of the problem, as Gary has said, and I said previously, is our own education. And in Ukraine, people don't think of a bank like we do because they never had a bank like we had. So they use monobank and payment cards very easily, and their uptake and application is very, very high.
Absolutely. So one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you back on, Brendan, is the project for rebuilding parts of Ukraine has already commenced.
Yes.
So maybe you'll tell us a little bit about that and the whole plan behind it.
So, I mean, the war is full flow and it's getting very intensive. Where, Ramstein happened. Ramstein, if you don't know what that is, was 40 countries. All of their military political leaders came together. Bigger than NATO, bigger than Europe. It was countries from across the world who came together and agreed that they would militarily support Ukraine. That means NATO standard weaponry from Germany, from Austria, from America, from Great Britain is going in, because the battle is becoming very intense. Yesterday, 400 Russians were killed simply because there's so many Russians there. It's easy to kill 400. It's a relationship between the number of people there and how many you're killing. And this battle, as you probably know, has moved to the east and the south of the country, which means that the early attacks in places where I live, in Irpin and Gostomel and Bucha, those towns now are in recovery mode. Three things have happened in the last 5 days. The government has laid the framework for repair and renewal, and some of it is rebuilding work. Some of it is, taking devastated areas, rebuilding, and they're building like for like. So if you had a house, they build you the house. If you had an apartment block, you get an apartment block. There's an awful lot of it which is cleaning. So, there's thousands of tons of steel. Some of the photographs you would have seen in the first few weeks of streets filled with burnt out tanks and APCs and people carriers, all of that kind of thing. That's all gone now, and that'll go into the steel furnaces and be made into steel and sent to Europe. And then there's a beginning of this small works, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands, possibly currently uncounted number of broken windows and doors. And this is the big challenge, because if you can replace those windows and doors, they're habitable buildings. Now, the issue with that, of course, is can you live in the same place where there's an atrocity, where your neighbor was killed? There are still hidden bombs. There are still hidden grenades. They've put them under carpets. They've put them under washing machines. They've put them in radiators. They've put them in children's toys. A couple of days ago, I was shown a photograph of a teddy bear, Charles teddy bear, and they put a grenade inside it. And these grenades have little metal darts, so that they shred any human flesh if they go. So you have that, but then they've done 500 kilometers of road restoration, and they've rebuilt 12 bridges, right? And this is a lot of work. 400 million is going into the small repairs. Billions and billions will go into the bigger repairs. It'll cost $1 billion just to repair Irpin. So the repairs will be several $1 trillion all over Ukraine. Some of it is commercial, some of it is residential, some of it is infrastructure like bridges, railways, and that kind of thing. So they're repairing it even though they're still being attacked.
And did I read somewhere that they're actually looking at bringing 3D printers, huge 3D printers in for part of the construction plan?
So the global community is coming to help Ukraine, and there are flat pack mobile homes that come, and they look like they're half a meter deep, and then you lift them on a pin and they unfold as a 3D house. There's probably 3D printers. There's companies that worked in the Lebanon when there were big explosions, and they reconstitute the broken concrete and glass into building materials. So they're coming. There's a lot of rapid build technology being mooted, but all of these are ideas at the moment. Some of them are there, but you're going to see all sorts of different trials. Now, what the Ukrainians want are sustainable living cities, not something that's okay for the next 2 years and then you need to replace it. And that's a challenge, because your temporary accommodation is very simple to put in. You can't live in them. They're tiny. They're like a porta cabin, right? And they're provided so people can repair their properties. But the state agencies are working very hard. The cleaning companies working hard. Over the weekend, there were 2 tragedies where one person who was clearing a building, they'd hidden a grenade under a piece of block, and he lifted the block and it killed him. And another one was killed driving a truck of debris, and they'd put a grenade under a part of the road and killed him. So dangerous and dynamic. But all of these things are coming to play now, and some very, very big billion-dollar companies that I've been talking to are moving into Ukraine now.
So, Gary, you thinking of opening a sub office in Ukraine, maybe?
God, a few times I've been asked would I move off the island of Ireland to actually do what we do, and I would, and if it was opportunity there, um, absolutely, absolutely. I've never visited
Yeah, and
Ukraine.
there is an opportunity that prior to this, there was about 120 billion a year that was outside of the formal economy, and that was um, money transited outside of the banking system. As I said, the banking
Wow.
system has about 47 billion in it, and as you can imagine, in the island of Ireland, we have more than that for short-term loans. So, platforms, money transit systems, all of that kind of thing, it was beginning to develop as they liberalized the banking and they began to define the banking in a much narrower piece. And as I said, you have these these digital banks like Monobank, exactly the same as Revolut. But on the investment and the business side of things, there's a vast, vast opportunity
Wow.
because at the minute it's unregulated, and that causes problem for the investor and it causes a problem for the business. And
Yeah.
that's part of what I was working on there for the last 5 years.
So interesting.
Absolutely. So, as we approach the summer, there's a question that every guest gets asked on the show, as you both know, and that is about your favourite late bite lunch. So, coming into the nice and the better weather, what are you up for this week, Terry?
My favorite lunch, and last time you asked me that question, Rory, I gave you an answer for the dirty lunch and then the nice lunch.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going back to just the nice lunches on their own now, and my favorite, which actually I'm going over to have when we're finished here, just a bagel, smoked salmon, and scrambled egg and tomatoes. That for me is just God. That's the best. Cup of
Absolutely.
tea as well, of course.
Oh, don't forget the cup of tea. And what about yourself, Brendan? Because I know, having longed for that bacon sandwich all the way back from Ukraine,
Yeah.
is it still there, or have you moved on to?
So the rasher sandwich is still there, but now the 99 ice cream, um, it's something that you have to put out of your mind when you go to a country like Ukraine because it's not possible. But they're popping up everywhere now, and I'm thinking, oh God, that's superb. So the lunch today would be the 99 ice cream, the big one.
Oh, very nice
Healthy
indeed.
lunch, Brendan. I think my son would love that lunch more than anything else now, to be fair.
Yes, absolutely. So I was asking you there just before we came on. Um, Sorry, just Monique wants to go back on where we were talking about the rebuilding there and the repairing was still being attacked. What extraordinary spirit the Ukrainians are showing, and Brendan has that spirit too. I saw the devastation of his home on LinkedIn, yet he's here being positive and forward looking. So admirable.
Oh, thank you, Manny. That's very kind. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I was asking you just before we came on air there, Brendan, about now that the family have had a chance to somewhat adjust to life in Ireland. In the longer term, would the plan be to go back to Ukraine, or like I'm hearing from a lot of people, and a lot of people who thought they'd already be gone back home.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people have gone back home. At one point, I had 8 people staying with me, Ukrainians. 2 of them went back to work to support the people escaping from Mariupol because they wanted to be involved in the relief effort and look after the children and the people who were coming out from there. And there's over 1 million, as far as I understand, in the last week that have crossed the border going back into Ukraine because now they want to get back to the homes. And actually, in European, they're asking you, please don't come back. It's dangerous. We don't have the water. We don't have the gas. We don't have the electric yet. And all of the builders are busy. So if you come here, you're only going to be asking us for things that we can't give you now. So be patient. So there's a lot of that want to go back. The reality is that there isn't to go back to for some people because things have altered so much. There will be memories that they won't be able to deal with, maybe. but certainly here, a lot of them are getting jobs in order to earn money to go back. So they're going and they're working very hard. My wife's had 2 interviews. She had a trial job yesterday. She's going to have a trial job next week. And she wants to go to work. But her idea is like many Ukrainians, save up as much money as possible so that you can repair what you've got back in Ukraine. But I do know it's very difficult emotionally. Being here, Ireland is not Ukraine. We're not Ukrainians. We're very different. How we speak is very different. How we live is very different. A lot of it is apartment living, and we live in houses mostly. Our cities are green and small. Their cities are big and industrial, and so it just feels different. And that takes getting used to for a lot of people. And so it's a question, and not everybody will go back. Not everybody will stay here. But I do know wherever Ukrainians are, they make a massive contribution. Very hard workers, very intelligent, hard thinking. Not everybody, obviously, we all have our own characters and personal kind of weaknesses, but in general, superb people who will be an asset to Ireland, and a lot of them in the technology field, would be superb for Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think it's shown, seeing the number of them who are crying out and saying, "Look, put me to work doing whatever you want, and I will go and do it." And that they have a real work ethos, a lot like the Irish who went to England previously.
Yeah, very much like the Irish. When we went overseas, we were looking for work. And even though this happened, and the difficult thing to understand really is on the 23rd of February, 22nd of February, everything was tense, but normal. Everybody was happy. They were doing the usual thing. The 24th is when the cruise missiles hit and the helicopter gunships came in, and the big planes where they were throwing tanks and people, soldiers at high level and landing all around Europe. And of course, the conflict there, the war there was very bitter, fought for 4 or 5 weeks. And people have been in Ireland for less than 4 weeks. 5 weeks is the maximum you would have been because of the journey time to get from Ukraine. So it's a very, very small window. But I was speaking to someone in social welfare, and they said that they have to review all of the other countries because so many Ukrainians have been on social welfare and then they're off it because they have a job. Compared to every other nationality who's come to Ireland, Ukrainians are well ahead of everybody else. And now there's an internal review to say, well, hang on a minute, if the Ukrainians can do it, why can't others? And it's part of what you say, Rory. They don't really worry about what the job they've got. They're not always they want to use their skills, absolutely. But give me a job, let me do my job and let me learn, and then I'll go and create my own business and create my own wealth, which is part of their character, like ours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd say also the other thing with being here is the accent, adjusting to all the different accents.
Sure, even in the mountains, I live in the Cooley Mountains. Every ditch has an accent. Every tree speaks a different way. The wind has a different way of blowing in the Cooley Mountains. You go to Omeath, it's different to Carlingford. You go to Carlingford, it's different to Greenock. There's differences, and we speak really quickly. And of course, there's a lot of people here from Dublin and Belfast. So the mix of Irish people accents in this area is huge. And Ukrainians are going, oh, okay, we have to understand all of these different accents. And some of it is not English because, as you know, we use words that are not connected to England. And we also use some nicknames for things. And they've never heard of these nicknames. So it's interesting. And if you take heart and you just get into it for the adventure of it, you can enjoy it. But I know that some people struggle very badly with it too.
Yeah, and I just say there, Maggie Geraghty has just commented in relation to that. Amazed at the work ethic of the Ukrainians. We have a family staying with us here and are currently working on a CV. We have an automotive engineer, a solicitor, and an accountant. Amazing.
Yes. Absolutely. And I'm glad Maggie wrote that, because it's not like I'm a fan and I'll say anything. It's the reality, and it's great when other people will validate what I say.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it just because I greatly respect Ukrainians, but it's really great when you hear somebody else say a similar thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Gary, I want to come back to the to talk a little bit about the peer-to-peer lending. As you know, and something I've regularly been vocal about, is I have grave concerns about the lack of regulation around peer-to-peer lending.
Okay.
I know the regulations are on the way. So the question I would ask you is, what would you like to see in coming out in those regulations?
Well, they've kind of already been defined really with the framework that's coming through, and I'm glad it's actually in line with what I would have wanted, which is, like, first of all, the announcement with the central bank in January. It's a very positive development for everyone in that space. It's it's been campaigned for since before I joined Grid Finance in 2015. I've sat in a room with the Central Bank of Ireland and representatives from Link Finance and Flender, and got a sense of how much they actually didn't understand about the sector. That was probably about 5 years ago, and thankfully now we're seeing it coming in. And you know, the biggest thing that they have to bring this regulation in is it has the retail investor protection measures. That's more important than anything else. It really, really is, and because that has to be included in the framework. The biggest level of protection has to be for the retail investors, the people who are putting in the money on the credit platforms, the people who are lending to the businesses. They're the ones that really need the protection. The business owners, are big and bold enough to deal with that, but and it's good to see I think that's where the central banks is primarily focused, is around that, because going to trust, confidence, they're essential for getting new markets and new products to be adopted by the general public. And you go back a couple of years ago, the Central Bank of Ireland were putting out a notification about be wary of crowdfunding. And they should have been, while they were doing that at the same time in the UK were introducing what was called an innovationizer, where they were encouraging people to get involved in it and get tax breaks. So that's just how far we are behind, Rory. But look, it's great. Look, it really is. I'm looking forward to coming in. I can tell you, every single lending platform that's involved in it is going to open arm welcome it to come. Lots of them. I can speak from practical experience inside Grid Finance, and now I've been, doing lending through Linked Finance. All of their platforms are already set up to meet the best practices that have been introduced by other markets that have peer-to-peer lending involved in them. So the blueprint was already there. You look at it, just even a combination of those two lenders, they've already serviced over 3,000 businesses in this country with lending, and well over $250 million in lending as well. So I know they're already set up for it, so it won't be a massive adjustment for them. So yeah, look, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it for the reason, because it will bring confidence from people like yourself, and we do need people to challenge when change like that happens. We need people to challenge it, and then get them people to say, okay, I'm now comfortable with what I'm seeing. So you as an accountant, Rory, can now go to a client and say, we're confident that using these non-bank space lenders, you will be serviced well. You'll be serviced better. And that's a big and bold comment that I make all the time. You'll be better serviced in that space than you would be by the banks.
Right. As I said, I mean, one of my biggest concerns is there traceability on where the funds are originating?
Yes.
And because, again, from an accounting point of view and from a technical side of it, there has to be traceability there. And that's the one thing that has always concerned me the most with peer-to-peer. Is there that full level traceability?
Yeah, all of those platforms follow all the and in some cases, more stricter AML guidelines. I know from practical experience, when I was working in Grid Finance, for example, I was the guy who used to take in the lodgements, and I was the guy. I was managing their fund at one time for the Cash Advance Investment Fund for Cullen, and I know the checks that go into the money that's coming in to make sure that it's legit, that it's not, they're not dealing with politically exposed people, they're not dealing with criminals. those questions and those identifications through KYC, they're all done to a very, very high level.
Yeah. No, well, that, as I said,
They
that's good
really,
to have.
like, the lenders themselves, they know it has to be, like, because they can't afford to, they're so young, though, and there's so little of them in Ireland that they can't afford to get it wrong. Like we always said when we were in Grid and was just Grid and linked in the peer-to-peer sector, I always remember being in Grid and saying, Grid can't afford for Link. This is going back 5, 6 years. We couldn't afford for Link to get something wrong, and Link can't afford for Grid to get it wrong, because if they got it wrong, 50% of the players in the market, there was only two, obviously, got it wrong. So that's why the levels of the KYC and the AML were really, really high. And from onboarding new lenders, new retail lenders, the typical, as soon as it hits near 10 grand, you're subject to checks. If there's any sort of, there's trained eyes working in these institutions, these are, they're very educated and trained eyes to see transactions that doesn't match up and to question them. So yeah, and again, I always say this when I'm dealing with clients, I can uniquely speak about that because I've been on both sides of the fence. I worked inside the lender. I was the fourth member of staff when I joined Grid. I moved through as we scaled that business, as we took in investment. I worked all the way up from being the junior sales to the operations manager, to understanding everything, to being the fund manager. So I can speak uniquely about the different levels of checks that I've done all along that, and they're stringent, to say the least.
That's good. So tell me, Brendan, if somebody came to you and said, I have a great idea and I'm going to start doing a business, what advice would you be offering them?
Well, the first one is ambition. It doesn't really matter what your idea is if your ambition isn't big enough. Okay, when you start a business, you need massive amounts of energy and enthusiasm, and the driving force of that is your ambition. So that's the first thing. It's not a halfway house business. You're either in it or you're not in it, right? If you're halfway, it's crucifixion. It's painful. So that's the first thing, your ambition. And the second thing is to understand that the value of an idea is not measured by you. It's measured by the marketplace. You're solving a problem. So what is the quality of that problem that you're solving? And if you can't answer that easily, you need to go back and think about your product or service. Not from what I can do. I have a brilliant idea. I'm a genius. Look what I've created. But look at the problems. Focus at the problem-solving aspect. And when you're solving people's problems, it becomes immediately obvious to your potential customer, because they go, that's great, because you've taken away a problem that's caused me so much pain. And that pain point is the thing that attracts the interest. The third thing is deliver. You have to deliver, because that's your credibility. That's where people get the validation of the idea and you as a business. So you preserve your credibility by ensuring that you keep your promises. It doesn't matter if you're up 23 hours a day, doing whatever you've got to do, but in that moment where you move it from you to your customer, that has to be as good as possible, right? Because you're building the goodwill and the confidence, things about referral, things about brand understanding, brand credibility is done in a very short window of time when somebody sees, buys, and uses your product. And you really need to make sure that that credibility is there. So that's what I would say. Those three aspects will be what I would say for somebody who would come to me and say, I want to be in business.
Gary, anything you'd want to add to that? Or
No, to be honest, the first two that Brendan mentioned there, I've experienced them with my own self. The ambition side of it, I knew when I left Grid Finance at the end of 2019, I knew that what I wanted to do in my business was to solve a very high value problem for business owners, which was access to finance. So we knew we had a big challenge to do, which was educating the market, but not just educate, then actually provide the access. So that's where we found great success from. And my ambition, God, I had a baby when the pandemic just started. There's 95% of my target clients closed down overnight. So, but I always knew that what we were doing was, I knew we could be successful doing it. And there's 100 reasons I've had in the last 2.5 years where I could have stopped doing it and down tools and said, just going to go back and get a job. But we didn't, and we persevered, and we've done well. One thing that's really going to help me along the way as well was just surrounding myself with the right people at the right time. And what I mean by that, I found when I went out on my own as a business owner, there was a lot of everybody in the world wanted to help me, but they also wanted to sell me something. And I bought into it in some cases where, I can help you here. Maybe you should sponsor us here. And I was like, oh, but when I couldn't really start, I surrounded myself with 3 people who were absolutely not yes men, who kind of told me the reality of the world of running a business. And that actually helped me get through the pandemic, get businesses, get money in the bank, understand my own value and what we were bringing to people, and then build on that as well. So, surround yourself with the right people. And then on top of the 3 points that Brendan mentioned there, absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, don't be afraid to ask for help, I think, is a very important one to add in
Oh,
there
for
as
sure.
well.
I've had my accountant say no to me more times than yes, which is great for me. I've had a sales coach around me that I've openly said, I know I know what I'm doing. I know what the finance product is. I know how to do it, but I might need clients to understand that. So from a sales perspective, please tell me how to do this. So as you said, Rory, asking for help is, I think Confucius, didn't he had a quote about something like that. I don't know the quote off the top of my head, but it would just be better to be fooled for a minute and ask a question than be a fool for life and not ask the question if you are. So yeah, I'm always that guy who says, guys, I don't understand this. Please explain it again until I do. And then,
Yeah,
so absolutely.
absolutely. Absolutely. And Brendan, Maggie just wants to let you know that she thinks you're going to have a new career as a motivational speaker.
Well, I need one. I need a career. I certainly do. So that'd be great. Yes, thank you. I'm
Right.
open
So,
for parties, christenings, or whatever else.
yeah, even divorce parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
So we're nearly coming up towards the end of the show. So we've just one more little item to throw at you. With the Euro Millions jackpot heading for 160 million, seeing as you're both financial minded people, what would you do if the right numbers came up on Friday night?
You think that question through in your head a million times, don't you? And then you see an ad and they're building water parks. And you're like, well, that's not something I don't think I'd ever do anyway. But God, I don't know. What would I do? It's one of those questions where you could do anything with 160 million, really, couldn't you?
Yeah.
I'll let Brendan answer first. I'll put the pressure on him.
Sure, because I've had some. I haven't won any money ever, but I know people who've had, and they've asked advice. The first thing is to put away a lump of money in a very solid return. It's low yield, but it's going to pay you every week, every month for the rest of your life, and you leave it. So you put in whatever it is. If you put 10 million of money away, you can live on that for a long time if it's in a solid
Yeah.
investment. You're getting the same salary you would if you were working. And then you sit down and then you do what your passion is, right? You follow your passion. A lot of people think that they need to give to charity. But the best thing to give people is the ability to earn for themselves. Rather than giving aid, is to help people help themselves. So investing in small businesses, supporting the local economy, supporting people who can repay that and create a trust that allows that is very important, because it's self-perpetuating, that the money it makes will keep it going for longer than you just giving it away over a long time. And the third piece, I think, is is to avoid giving it to people, because money is a poison. Money is toxic. If you give someone more money than they can imagine, usually they destroy themselves. There's many examples of this. So when they want to sort of literally get rid of it, don't give it to people who might drink it or use it for drugs or use it for lavish lifestyles and burn it, because they become deeply unhappy. So try and think of it the most constructive possible way that people can use, but not to keep it, right?
Yeah.
You may well be giving it to experiences. So people who, you know, maybe they have a limit. They can't go to access education. They can't do something about a travel. Maybe they're unwell and they need to go on a holiday because their life is threatened. Just do something that is human and humanly supportive instead of just giving it to people who might damage their lives with it. Because as I said to you, money is a poison, and you need to be very careful with it, especially the big amounts of money.
Yeah, there's probably more value that you get as an individual by doing that than actually the money itself, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And you've your lump of money that's going to give you the few pound every month that you need for living anyway, and you just get busy with the rest of it.
Yeah, I think I was reading the other day. There was a Euro Millions lotto winner in the UK, and she'd given away over 60 million of the 120 that she'd won. And she was kind of like, I can't let my husband know because he'd be shocked. But she was saying she done a list, and she said she already had a list before she won the lotto because she always felt like it was going to happen. But yeah, she's openly giving it away to charity. So yeah, we see that. That's interesting. And it's good what you said there, Brendan. Like I kind of that would resonate with me a lot in regards to investing in small businesses. And one of the ideas that I've always wanted to do, and I'm a bit away from getting there, would be to this office we have in Crumlin. You know, this is essentially called Think Space 12, which is what I want to be one of the Think Spaces in all the areas of Dublin. We move into a new area, we Think Space 7 in Dublin 7, and so on. And the idea there is to create a kind of a hybrid between a co-working place and an incubator. And again, once we get those young businesses in, is to be able to say, listen, we really like what you're doing. We'd like to give you some money to support you. And as a passive income for you, that could come back as a 10x or 20x return in time. So for sure, I get that.
Yeah, the digital hub at one stage was fantastic, right?
Yeah.
I was connected to it at the time when it was probably at its best, because it was that community and it was that spirit and it was exciting, and people had no fear and no barriers, and there were others who were prepared to give people money just to keep them alive, to keep the dream alive. And it's a shame that the digital hub went the way it went. And as I understand it, it no longer exists. But that community spirit you're talking about, Gary, is so rewarding, right? So enthusiastic, great ideas, great motivation, and it empowers other people who might be a little afraid of jumping into business. But when they see other people, they go, "Hey, if they can do it, I can do it." And it would be a very powerful thing, I know, and I would be a great supporter of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Zeb, we've covered pretty much everything I'd planned on, so thank you both very much. Before I let you go, Brendan, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, the best way to do it?
Through LinkedIn. Everything's on LinkedIn. You find me there, and you can connect with me through there, and or email me brightbusiness@irelandmail.com, and then we can take it from there.
Great. And Gary, if anyone's looking to get in touch with yourself, what's the best way to get you?
Yeah, two easy ways. Any of our social media platforms, we're on all of them. We can either direct messages through it, or else, particularly my own LinkedIn profile, all my contact information is there. Or come through the website. All the contact information is on the website. It's www.simplyfinance.ie, simply spelled with an I. And yeah, we respond very quickly as well. So
great. Well, listen, Brendan, Gary, I really appreciate you taking the time out today to join us. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with another panel of guests, and until then, wish you all a very good afternoon.
Thanks. Great to meet you, Brendan.